Welcome, Pathfinders. I'm Rick.
And I'm Heather.
And we're here today to talk to you about Ultimate Wilderness. The newest hardback in the Pathfinder role-playing games line of assorted hardbacks. It's a little bit redundant as I say it like that, but that's fine. Hey, Winston. So basically, this is the new 250-page book. Probably going to pop up something here, but here's the book. It's very nice. It's well made. Hardy. So basically, it's 7 chapters of, I'm going to roughly use the term new material. Before we go any further, I'm going to just address the whole controversy surrounding this book in that it has a lot of reprinted material.
I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. So I only usually buy the hardcovers, so I didn't even know some of the things in here were reprinted.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I saw the Thundercaller archetype for bards, and I was like, hey, that's really cool. They finally made a Thundercaller archetype, because we'd just gone through Curse of the Crimson Throne. And
then I pointed out that it's already existing archetype, because I'm obsessive compulsive and buy everything.
So, and there's, and even just flipping through it before we were starting to film this video, I pointed out a few things I thought were cool, and Rick and Jessica were both like, oh, that's in the Familiar Folio, or that's in the Animal Archives, and I'm like, well, I don't have those books, because...
Yes, so a large portion of this people have basically thrown out, and I've heard the number thrown around of 1/3 of the book is reprinted material. Now, me personally, I own all of the stuff this comes out of, so all the stuff that it's like, you know, this comes out of the Races of the Wild, and this comes out of, you know, the Animal Archives and the Familiar Folio. I really don't have an issue with it, because it kind of consolidates it into one location. There are some editing issues, but I figured we'd throw this out the first. We're going to be using a lot of terms of like new blank, like new familiars and all the rest of that. We understand before the comments are filled up with things that they are not in fact new. So we're going to be judging this book on its own merits, not on any of the other material, so we're going to be basically addressing what is in this book. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about this book. The book itself is divided into 7 chapters. Each one of the chapters dealing with a vast variety of things. There's a little bit of overlap back and forth, but that kind of comes with most books. The first chapter is basically dedicated to races and a new class. So I suppose we'll just start with the races first. The first of the races on this list are the Gathlanes. The Gathlanes originally appeared in another supplement. I believe they were touched on in the Ultimate Race book.
Yeah, but I think they have it's the Fae little soft cover
that delves into them a lot more. They originally appeared in the Advanced Race Guide, though.
Jordan's playing a Gathlane in one of our other games, and of course he statted him out before this book came out, and I think he used that Fae book that's titled, I can't remember right now, for the statistics.
Like Legacy of the First World,
yeah,
I think
there
it was.
You go.
And so the Gathlane are just use the term, new race. The Gathlane are a small-sized Fae race. A lot of people love to point out that they did have a little typo in there and did not include the fact that they are racial type Fae. The Gathlane are a new race. They are a small-sized Fae. They have a +2 bonus, I believe, to their dexterity and their charisma, and a -2 penalty to their constitution. But yeah, the Gathlane have racial bonuses that really make them good for basically any sort of the sneaky classes or anything along those lines with their dexterity bonus.
Good sorcerers with charisma.
Great bard option as far as that's concerned. The Gathlane are basically Fae from the First World that have landed. They more or less sprout from a tree that kind of reminds me of Legend of Zelda. Like the Deku tree just like drops acorns on the ground and then you sprout a new Gathlane and they run around like the Children of the Forest, the Kukuri? Kukuri. So they're a rather interesting option. They have wings, which actually means that they are a playable race from first level that has flight. Now, mind you, they have poor maneuverability. And so that's kind of given a little bit of debate up there. The Gathlane also gets some really cool bonuses. Despite the fact that they fly, they're also a base speed 30 for a small size creature, which is kind of interesting itself, as opposed to like the halflings and the gnomes and all the rest of those. They actually have a really cool bard archetype that ties in with the Gathlane that's Gathlane specific, that basically you're like a courtier with the First World and you gain all sorts of bonuses in dealing with like Fae, and you can actually like summon Fae, like summon Nature's Ally. So that's a really neat option. Following the Gathlane are the, I'm going to say Gorons, but it might be not pronounced that way.
Gorons are the rock people from Legend of Zelda. I'm sure it's not pronounced that way.
So the Gorans, we'll go with Rans. Gorans,
There
how's
you
that?
go.
The Goran are a plant-based race, which is rather interesting as far as things are concerned. I think it's the first time that you can actually just play a plant. The Gorans get a +2 bonus on their Constitution and Charisma and a -2 penalty to their Intelligence. They have like natural armor bonuses and everything else. I know, anytime that there's an intelligence hit, it's like, eh.
Yeah, I like my skill points.
It's part of the reason I've never played a full-blooded orc, because that -2 penalty to all of your mental stats is kind of hard to get past. Their big thing that a lot of people are kind of taking away from this is they have an ability called Seed. And it's an extraordinary ability, where as a 4-round action, a Goran can expel a seed from their body. If planted in fertile ground and left undisturbed for 2d6 days, the seed grows into a healthy duplicate of the original Goran, save that duplicate can reallocate all skill ranks upon sprouting. Once a Goran expels the seed, it gains 1 negative level, and it dies as soon as the duplicate sprouts.
That's weird.
Yeah. And so effectively, you can completely recreate your character's skill ranks. And when it sprouts, it no longer possesses the penalties that the initial race did. And so it's the whole idea of like your character contracts lycanthropy, just plant a new seed. It's kind of interesting with the backstory for the Gorans in the fact that their race actually can't reproduce. So if there are 1,000 Gorans in existence, that's all there will ever be.
Huh.
And so if they die by violence and don't have a chance to sprout or things along those lines, then that's just one fewer in existence.
Interesting.
And so instead of reproducing, they effectively just like clone themselves into a new version of themselves that knows different things.
So what happens if you have the sproutling going on and your character dies? Does that stop the sprouting, or does that continue?
No, I think you just continue on with the negative level. And
no, I'm saying if your character dies while it has this negative level because it's within the 2d6 days, does the sprout stop? Because
the sproutling still sprouts.
Okay, so
it's kind of an idea that it makes your character unkillable.
Yeah.
So
it's just let's run around with a negative level all the time and then I'm good. That's strange. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, so it's gotten a little bit of debate. And finally, much to the delight of many people, are the Vine Leshy.
The picture in the book is the one that looks like Baby Groot, right?
Yes, looks like Baby Groot.
So you can play Baby Groot.
You can play Baby Groot now. The Leshy were actually introduced a while back, and they can actually be used as a companion
fighting
creature.
them in some game or another, I thought.
Yeah. They gain a +2 bonus on Constitution and Wisdom, a -2 penalty to their Intelligence. They're small-sized creatures. They have an assorted number of cool abilities where they can pass without a trace and all the rest of that. They're interesting. I kind of like them. They're fun conceptually. They have a really weird ability that when they die, they explode out in energy that heals plants. I think that's more flavorful than anything that would actually be a mechanical benefit to a party.
So do you have to have true resurrection to bring one back if their body explodes? Because you don't have a body to raise dead on?
I think it's just an energy burst.
Okay.
I don't think you explode.
Because that's not cool, man.
But yeah, other than that, the Vine Leshies have some interesting abilities to them. Strangely, I think you could actually you can be a Vine Leshy and actually take another type of Leshy as a companion.
That's creepy.
Which is a little odd.
Creepy.
But yeah. So they're rather interesting. And I suppose now that we've addressed the three races, we'll get to the meat of this whole thing, moving on into the class.
So the Shifter.
The Shifter, yes. If any of you have so much as touched the Paizo message boards, you'll understand that there's apparently a large debate over the Shifter. We're not going to delve deep into that debate. We both looked over the Shifter.
It doesn't look really that bad. I try to reserve judgment on a class until I've played it or seen someone else play it in a game that I am actually in.
I've seen it run in a Pathfinder Society scenario, but no, I have not actually personally played it.
I think it's kind of cool.
Let's tackle its concept for starts. It was basically billed as being the nature equivalency to a paladin. It is dedicated master of many forms, wild shaping class, conceptually. The benefits to it is I actually really like the flavor to it. The concept of the flavor, the fact that you start with 2 claw attacks, basically right out of the bat, it gets a progression akin to the monk or the brawler or the war priest, where basically your claw attacks increase in damage as you go. It is a full base attack class. It has fighter hit points. Its skills are good, and a decent selection of them, and it's you basically get to choose an animal that you focus on.
They get several as they level up, several aspects, and
then
you
get
can kind of
different
mix
aspects.
and match.
And you get like lesser bonus and greater bonuses for these aspects. A lot of the low level ones basically translate as a +2 stat bonus.
Yeah, and the stat bonus increases as you level up. I think like at 8th level, and then again at like 15th or something.
And so it does progress as you level. The complaints about the class are primarily around the idea that as a dedicated shapeshifter, it doesn't actually do it as well as the druid.
Well, they also have a full base attack, so you kind of have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
If they had shapeshifting as good as a druid, and then also had a full base attack on top of it, I think it might actually be a little bit too much.
Right. And their attacks are natural attacks, so it does actually open you up to a lot of the feats out of the bestiary, basically giving you access to a variety of different feats that you normally wouldn't have, like improved natural attack. Which is kind of a fun option. There's an interesting amount of wording for it. I've actually heard this thrown around quite a bit, where it gives you 2 primary attacks. So you get 2 attacks at your highest base attack, much like your 2-weapon fighting. But of course, you do not get your iterative attacks with primary attacks like that. And so, for instance, once you hit a 6 base attack and you would get a 6 and then a +1, you're still just doing the 2 claw attacks. Unless you basically pick up a weapon and then you can do like a secondary attack. Or feasibly, you could even branch out and do, a different build with the character and get secondary attacks.
2 claw attacks at your full base attack is still going to be better than the 6-1 for a while. Yeah. I really don't think it would matter until you're starting to get 3
Once
attacks.
you hit like 11th level.
And then maybe you might consider doing something, but still, that's 2 attacks at your full base attack, regardless of what you're doing.
Right.
And you get, an Amulet of the Mighty Fist or something like that, and then they're magical with the +5 eventually to hit and damage, and I think that would even out with a fighter with the more attacks, just because you have 2 at your full.
Yeah, I mean, except for like a min-maxed fighters, going like a 2-weapon fighting or anything along those lines, but with the standard fighter build or a sword and board build. But it gets a little bit of a debate back and forth over that, and some people do complain that that is a little bit complex for a starting character, because there's a lot of things where people are like, oh, well, if you're first starting out. I'm
still of the opinion that you really should limit new players to the core classes.
Overall, I think the class is alright. I think it's kind of a middle of the pack. If you're looking for something min-maxy, or if you're looking for something that's going to dominate and play, no, this isn't the place to look. It has some really good options. The archetypes that basically play in with it are really good. And so I think it's going to have a great deal of variety as it progresses.
And they'll add more animal aspects in other books, just like they add archetypes and
I liked that it had a tiger.
And everything.
I liked that it had a tiger aspect, but I was a little disappointed that it didn't have like a lion aspect or anything, especially because we're looking at Mummy's Mask right now. So it's like, ooh, a lion aspect. That would be kind of fun, like a savannah sort of thing.
And they probably just decided, I imagine they did the bare basics. We have a bear, we have a big cat, we have...
the bare necessities.
Yes, but it's one of those, we have the bear, we have a big cat, we have a wolf. Eventually,
and again, you can use the tiger as kind of representative of a lion. Yes, they're vastly different creatures, but still cats.
I'm sure eventually there will be a lion aspect.
Yeah. This is probably something that they're going to add in new aspects and everything for it as it progresses. And so I think that if you keep an eye on this class, you're going to get a lot of new options for it. Is it necessarily like what everyone expected it to be coming into this? No. But I honestly thought it was a half-decent class.
I'd like to see it played, before I really make a judgment. But on paper, I don't think it looks as bad as some people think it seems.
Yeah. Speaking of archetypes,
there are a ton of archetypes in this book. Oh my gosh.
Chapter 2 of this book is Archetypes. 63 pages of archetypes covering 20 classes with 2 to 4 pages for each of these classes. And then an additional section at the end covering everything else.
There is a Blackguard archetype in this book.
Yeah.
I don't actually know if I've ever seen another Blackguard archetype anywhere.
They sneak them in occasionally because I believe that the Blackguard is a secret favored of some of the...
the Blackguard is pretty cool.
Yeah. And so there are a lot of archetypes. Honestly, it's probably the largest archetype selection I've seen here. And just to give you an idea, outside of these 63 pages of archetype, there are archetypes snuck in earlier on.
They're
and
talking
then scattered
about,
around later on in the
noticed
book.
when they're talking about, they have a section where they talk about the green faith, and there are 3 archetypes just hidden in the back of that section.
Stealth them
it's
in
like,
there.
hey, here's 3 more archetypes if you follow the green faith.
Yeah.
You know?
And so this book is chock full of archetypes. I like a lot of them. I would honestly say that I like a majority of them, having read over them. A lot of them are specialized.
So they're really good archetypes for like the Kingmaker adventure path, or even there was a few in there that I was like, hey, this would be good for Mummy's Mask because you're running around in the desert, and you know the Iron Fang invasion has a lot of stuff out in the wilderness. Yeah. So
this is the wilderness book, and so unsurprisingly, the archetypes very wilderness themed. A lot of them also kind of tie back into this whole idea of shape changing. I think there's like a shape changer vigilante archetype, which is pretty cool, and so it kind of all ties back in together. But this is more of a player section, and I know you've read pretty thoroughly through that.
Oh, more or less.
More.
The archetypes.
Do your homework.
I always look through the archetypes as a player. That's one of the things that really interests me. And there were a few that did stick out when I was flipping through. I mentioned earlier the Thundercaller Bard is something that's apparently been reprinted, but I hadn't seen it before, and I thought that was really cool. You can literally use your bardic music to call lightning down from the sky. Yeah.
It's a great tie-in also as far as non-setting neutral. It's a great tie-in to the Shawanti, which honestly they never get enough love, and I love the Shawanti.
So the Thundercaller is pretty cool. There's also a Dinosaur Druid, which is just amazing. All your wild shaping is into different dinosaurs. All of your Summon Nature's Ally are dinosaurs. And your Animal Companion is a dinosaur.
Yeah.
So, and you get to speak with dinosaurs at all times at 4th level, so you can just talk to dinosaurs.
So really good if you're doing something with dinosaurs.
Who doesn't like dinosaurs?
Yeah, kind of Land of the Lost sort of thing, or Savage Lands was the first thing I was thinking, and I was like, there was a show, but my mind immediately went to X-Men.
Why X-Men?
I don't know. Just the Savage Lands.
There's a Sylvan Trickster Rogue archetype where you get damage reduction for that gets bypassed by Cold Iron eventually, and you get all sorts of cool like stuff to help you interact with the Fae. You lose Knowledge Engineering, and I think you get Knowledge Nature instead, and so that's kind of cool. I liked that. Of course, I really like the Fae, so any excuse to like let's go run around with the Fae.
Yep.
There's one of the archetypes that I really liked in here is actually for the shifter. It's called the Were Touched, and you pick one animal instead of having a bunch of different aspects. You have one aspect, and it's basically what you shift into. And eventually you can do kind of a hybrid form, like a werewolf form, and you get damage reduction for silver, and your shifting ability is kind of more specialized. And I thought that was cool. Normally I don't do an archetype the first time I play a class, but if I played a shifter, I'd probably have to be a werewolf. I don't know. It just seems cool.
Yep. Or tiger.
Werewolf.
Or shark. Anyway.
I don't know. Do they have a shark aspect? I don't think you can do that now. There is a Slayer archetype, which is the Woodland Sniper, where you get sneak attack with a bow, and you get all sorts of bonuses to hide.
Well, I mean, you normally get sneak
attack. But it's specialized for specialized for the bow, and you can move through like tree branches without having it be considered difficult terrain, as long as you don't end on a branch that can't support your weight. So
it's kind of interesting because that kind of ties in. There's a feat actually, and we'll talk more about the feats here in the next section. But there's a feat that allows you to always count as you have a running start if you're in trees.
Oh, that'd be
so
cool.
That would actually tie in really well with that.
Yeah, it does mention that if you end on a branch that can't support your weight, the branch will. So you gotta make sure you got steady footing in the trees, guys. And the Summoner has become one of my favorite classes. If you watched our Let's Play videos for our Pathfinder Society, I was playing a Summoner. That was the first time I played it. And now I'm playing one in Carrion Crown, and it's freaking amazing. Everybody go play Summoners. And there is a new Eidolon in this book. It's a plant Eidolon, so you can choose to have for your Eidolon subtype for it to be a plant creature. So if you're running around out in the woods and stuff, you can have like a cool kind of Trent creature or something like that with you.
Yeah, kind of a Studio Ghibli,
Yeah.
plant thing in the wilderness, maybe wearing a mask, who knows. So, kind of a fun options. No, honestly, like, I thought the archetypes were generally speaking
there's a
good.
ton of archetypes. Those are just the few that I thought really stuck out to me. I'm sure everybody else will find ones that they think are cool.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, this is a really good book for like Kingmaker because that's one of the ones that I know a little bit about because we keep talking about playing it and then end up playing another adventure path. So I was like, oh, this would be cool for Kingmaker.
You'll hear us mention Kingmaker a lot in this one. So following the archetypes, we go into the feats.
There are cool feats in here too.
There are some really good feats in here. I know a lot of people are a little upset that the feats are, for lack of a better term, almost like very specific.
Well, I feel like, you were talking about this before we started shooting the video, that it seems like it's almost like you've got two camps of people. You've got people that play...
It's a very polarizing book.
You have people who play adventure paths, where you're going to be in the desert, or in the jungle, or in a city, and then you have people who play society, and you really don't know where your characters are going to be consistently. So having a favored terrain is not going to help you in society. But
as much as we played through place in the desert.
Yeah, we played through Serpent Skull a couple of years ago, and I was a slayer in that game, and I had favorite terrain jungle, and it applied in almost every single book. And there's a feat in here that I was like, oh, my character from Serpent Skull would have taken this feat because it enhances your favorite terrain. You get like you get perception bonuses, and the heat doesn't affect you as much, and like hot environments and things like that. But I could understand why somebody who plays society is going to be like, well, this feat is worthless. I'm never going to be I'm not always going to be consistent in, the desert or... Unless
you're like specifically playing like a year where it's just like, oh, well, for a large portion of the, the year of the demon, I'm in the whirlwind. And it's like, okay, well, then you have a general idea where you're going to be. But society does take you all over the place, and so, for society players, these feats may not be quite as useful because they really are tied. And a lot of these feats, like the environmental feats, the Arctic adaptation and the desert dweller feat, all the rest of that, they tie into a character that has favorite terrain.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So they're great feats, and most of this stuff is kind of geared towards the naturey classes. It's Ultimate Wilderness. The big feat tree that I liked was the expansion to the spring attack.
That's amazing. I'm already like, I'm going to do a fighter, and I'm going to tear stuff up.
And like, it's kind of fun because like, I have always liked the spring attack feat. I like the concept. I like it, intellectual.
I don't know. It's one of those things that I almost always do with I only ever do if I'm playing like a dex fighter, because it's one of those I can run up and smack something and spring away.
Well, you got to go into dodge and mobility and all the rest of that.
So, but now it's one of those, now I can take another feat and I can smack 2 people before I bounce away.
Yeah.
Oh, and then
eventually 3 at 16th level. Outside of the spring attack tree, really the only one that stuck out to me that they do add a number of new teamwork feats.
You and your Inquisitors.
And I love Inquisitors. And also, just to go back real quick and do a little bit of callback, there's a great new Cavalier archetype in this book for the Green Knight. And it gives you, and of course, like the Cavalier is huge on teamwork feats. And so having access to these teamwork feats are kind of fun. The one that stood out to me, and even has nothing to do with being a Cavalier, is there's a feat that effectively allows you to grant this, or you can take the feat and then use shared spell, even if it's not your companion.
Oh, that's really cool.
And so that whole idea of like, you could actually have a circle of druids and kick in a whole bunch of like, you have teamwork feat, and you're sharing spells amongst all sorts of different animal companions, or, if you have a wizard and you're a druid, you can share spells. There's a whole lot of fun things that kind of tie back into that. After the feats, we go into the wilderness rules. This was my section.
Yeah, that's all you.
I love the rules just in general. And so it goes through a lot of different things. I'm going to touch on these. I'm just not going to go into huge depths. They have new exploration rules.
Again, which if you've something good for Kingmaker.
If you've gone through Kingmaker, exploration is a huge part of that. It's actually a large part of like the early parts of Serpent Skull too, and kind of is touched on in a lot of things. And so these exploration rules give you a new option of doing this. And for anyone that's familiar with the library mechanics that they've introduced before, where you could do research in libraries, it's kind of like that, where it's you have a region that you're exploring, and you can use a variety of different skills. So that instead of it's just like, oh, well, we're tromping through this forest and now it's the ranger's time to shine, it's almost everyone can delve into it a little bit. And then you get points where you're exploring and you can find things. So it actually kind of makes the whole idea of just even finding the dungeon a lot more exciting. Instead of, just we wander into the woods, we have a couple of random encounters, and then we find where we're going. There's a whole new mechanic to it. There's a large section of the First World and the Eldest.
I do like the First World and the Fae.
And so a lot of this was touched on the legacy of the First World. But it does get into the whole, the Eldest as deities that you can use and gives you, domains and everything else there. It touches a lot in the First World. It expands on the concept of Fae haunts.
Oh.
So it's basically like a First World bleeding over into this one. So it kind of gives you that option of doing, my mind immediately goes to, the Lost Woods kind of thing in The Legend of Zelda, where it's just this creepy place that it's turning you around and getting you lost, and all this weird Fae haunting kind of thing is happening. There's a new section of the Green Faith, which we touched on a little bit earlier, which is good because it's one of those things that's never really expanded
No,
on.
they never really have talked much about the Green Faith other than, you worship nature. But now there's a good 4 or 5 pages on the Green Faith, I think.
Yeah. And a lot of interesting stuff. And for those of us who've been playing this since, way back in AD&D,
You're telling them how old we are.
Yeah, way back. It's interesting because it kind of ties into the original concept of the Druids.
Yeah, the Druids didn't really used to follow deities at all. They were all true neutral, and they worshipped
nature. You had your
nature.
Druid circle, and, you worship nature. And so I really like the expansion of the Green Faith. And then it does add in, 3 new archetypes in there, which are kind of specific to the Green Faith. I think there's an Inquisitor one.
Yeah, and I want to say...
which is kind of fun.
And I want to say maybe one was a Slayer archetype, too. It wasn't, Druid archetypes. It was archetypes for other classes.
Or at the very least, 2 new archetypes, I think.
2 or 3. I can't remember.
The next one, and this is just kind of a fun one because it's been something that has been thrown around in Pathfinder forever, and I can't believe it's taken us 10 years to get here. Harvesting poisons. There's never really been a huge concrete mechanic on this. It has been touched on elsewhere. But the whole idea of I kill a spider and now I'm going to take its spider venom and use it. It also brings in new poisons, which is always kind of a fun option. And so if you're actually looking for something like that, that's a great new option there. There's a whole section on hazards and disasters.
Yay.
Which is kind of fun. So, basically just more mechanical stuff for using earthquakes and, floods and things like that.
Because everybody needs a good earthquake now and then.
It happens every once in a while. There's a whole section on herbalism. Which is kind of fun and just gives you a foraging mechanic where you can go out and collect things, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on. There's a section on trophies, which I know for...
big game kind of trophies?
Yeah, basically collecting trophies and having a mechanical benefit. They touched on this before, but the whole trophy mechanic kind of falls back to, if you're a fan of the Monster Hunter series and things like that, collecting trophies from your enemies. The next section, and it's kind of a throwback for me, and so I loved it. The big section on the weather. And for me...
I hate weather mechanics. Because half the time I forget they're even a thing. And then it's you're taking a -2 because on your archery because it's raining. And I'm like, what the crap?
For me, it's actually... Well, this is actually functions a little bit... It's more along the lines of determining weather. And so this is kind of a throwback to me to when I first started playing 3rd edition,
we did have
and the Dungeon Master Guide, and once every 30 days, so once a month, your party had to take shelter from a tornado because you just randomly rolled it up.
That was a thing that happened.
Yeah, it was all the time, just randomly.
Our characters had really bad luck with the weather.
And so it's something that of course has been touched on. I mean, as you were just stating, the actual weather mechanics and everything are in the core rulebook. And then after that is a whole section on wilderness traps, which are just kind of fun.
Nice.
And you can always use traps. Book 4 or chapter 4 was really dedicated to the game masters.
It's a mechanics and a bunch of, how to use these rules and things like that. But there is some stuff for the players in there, like the Green Faith and the sticking in those extra archetypes and...
Yeah. And a lot of people kind of went into this thinking that this was going to be more of a game mastery book. And so I think the addition of all of these archetypes gave it a much larger player focus than was initially anticipated. Because a lot of players probably picked it up for the new class and for the races. But basically, you came for the new class and races, and you stay for the ton of archetypes. Following that is Chapter 5, which is all about companions and familiars.
I do love animal companions and familiars. If I could do that with every class ever, I would.
And really, you can with Nature's Bond. And so I think you were the one that pointed to me to the first section on that, which actually kind of is just about magic item slots.
There's like 2 pages that basically go quadruped, serpentine. What is it? And what magic item slots what your horse can use.
Yeah.
Or your snake, has. And it's
surprisingly,
one of those,
horses not so great with gloves.
I have a fox. It's a small quadruped. What slots does it have? So we don't have to sit down and think about it for an hour trying to figure out what slots you would give the creature.
Right. And so the magic item slots is a very useful section, more or less just to answer all those questions of, does my cat have to wear little cat boots?
Which they should, because it's cute.
So yeah, put some boots. I don't think cats actually can wear boots.
I don't either.
Which is a huge oversight.
Which makes me sad, because I don't think you could actually have the mittens of shocking graphs that you had that the cat familiar had in 3.5.
Following that are the new animal companions. I am again using new because they are featured here. But there are a number of animal companions. A few of my highlights in there are the chimpanzee, which I think was kind of fun, and it kind of ties back into the performer archetype that we'll get into later. There's hammerhead shark, which is kind of cool, especially if you're going into ruins of Aslan. Lots of water there. The llama.
Yeah, the llama again.
Mostly just because I think it's kind of fun to have a llama option.
Llamas are so cute.
Yeah. There's the saber-toothed cat, because if you haven't played Far Cry Primal, I love the saber-toothed cat in that. I know it was a little bit of a lesser-liked game, but just the whole idea of having a saber-toothed cat is such an iconic thing. Giant squid. Again, if you're going iconic. And I think there was one that was added in there that was of great interest to you.
The panda, which is the best animal ever, obviously. I love pandas.
She's a panda fan. And so there's a whole bunch, and that's just scratching the surface. There are a whole lot of them. And even if it's some of it's reprinted material and everything else, it's nice that it's consolidated into one place. And so it gives you access to all of that. There are also plant companions, which they add in there, which is really the one that immediately sprung out to me was the hunting cactus.
That's terrifying.
Because I just love the idea of a cactar that's just kind of walking along behind you doing its little cactar thing.
1,000 needles.
1,000 needles just stabbing people. There are vermin companions, which includes the giant dragonfly. As some of you people out there that are fans of Paizo's official podcast may know it as an ultramarine chaser. Following that are animal companion archetypes.
Archetypes for animal companions and familiars are really cool.
Yeah, and they do have a separate section that's basically familiar archetypes as well. The animal companion archetype does include a number of them. I've always been a fan of the bodyguard one, just because it's generally speaking useful. There's the familiar section, which includes variant familiars, which are basically just...
Yeah, they have rules for an Arctic fox instead of a normal fox, so its stats are just a little bit different. But
and the toucan.
Why would...
Ruins of Aslan. Toucan.
Okay.
Or anything that's going, heck, if you're playing it, they're included, parrots also included in here. And so a whole
Skull and
shackle kind of thing.
Parrot.
Yeah. They add in some new familiars in here, which are kind of fun as well. And the familiar archetypes, as we were discussing earlier, which include, various different archetypes, include a spirit guide one, which is kind of cool.
Well, I like the emissary one that my character's using. My familiar can cast guidance on me, which is handy.
Yeah. And so it gives you an opportunity, especially if you're a class that basically doesn't normally get a familiar, but you've taken things to get a familiar. For instance, the Eldritch Fighter, that, share spell's not that useful for you, so now you can replace it with something more useful for you. There are a large section of expanded companion tricks. This kind of clarifies a number of things that, people have basically been talking about for a while, of whether or not, if you give the animal the attack command, are they going to necessarily bull rush and things along those lines. Allowing the animal to aid, which I kind of like the idea of that, especially
you can teach your animal companion to flank now, so you can actually send your animal companion to help out the rogue.
I know this has also frustrated some people because they're under the impression that a lot of this should have already been kind of if it's a wolf, it should naturally flank. It's what a wolf does by instinct. And so, of course, it's going to be just up to your game master. But it does provide a concrete mechanic that if you run into something, that if you need to give your dog the command to bite onto a rope and pull you up, that, you know, there is an actual aid command now.
There's a lot of, I've noticed in games with animal companions that there can be a lot of debate over, well, my animal should be able to do this.
Yeah, how intelligent your animal is.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, animal companions are animals.
Yeah. And there's a fun section with some companion feats, which is just kind of a nice addition. Chapter 6 deals with spells.
Lots of spells.
Lots of new spells.
There's a paladin spell that lets you summon hippocampi to use as water mounts, and I'm like, yes. I will never use this spell, but that's amazing.
Yeah. that is just kind of fun. There are a lot of really flavorful spells. The ones that immediately stood out to me when I was going through this were the Fey form spells, which are 1st through 4th level, which allow you to take on the form of Fey, which is just kind of fun. There are also ooze form spells, which are pretty much the exact same thing.
That's gross.
So it's kind of like Beast Shape or Dragon Shape, but they're adding in
ooze?
extra ones. But I mean, some people really love oozes. Also, it'd be really good for like a villainous cult of, it's a Jubilex, I think, is the demon lord of oozes.
Something like that.
I may have to go back and double check that, but just off the top of my head, that sounds right. They add a new section in for rituals, for nature rituals. And I've been a big fan of the rituals mechanic. Just because it kind of adds in that extra level. This ties everyone back in. I know there's some debate because they have the snowball spell in here, which was originally a spell from a book out in 2013, I think, is People of the North.
I don't know. You were talking about this earlier, and I'm like, I don't even recognize that spell.
Which is basically a 1st level spell that gives you 1d6 points of cold damage per caster level to a maximum of 5. It is a touch spell that does not allow spell resistance since it's a conjuration spell. And upon hit, the target has to make a fortitude save or be staggered. It's pretty potent for a 1st level spell.
And they revised it in here.
They revised it to make it an evocation spell. Well, it is that whole idea of nerfing.
I really don't like that term.
Yeah. And it seems to be more along the lines of they brought it into line with the other spells of 1st level. And so I'm always of an opinion that if there's a spell of a level and you basically look at it and go, why would I take any other spell? Then that spell is not appropriately powerful.
Well, I mean, it reminds me like when the Unchained book came out and they changed a lot of the summoner spells and people were freaking out. And I'm like, really? You're going to give haste as a 2nd level spell to one class? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And so the snowball spell has been changed and updated in here. It's now an evocation spell. It does the exact same amount of damage, but as an evocation spell allows for spell resistance. It's still a touch attack. They just removed the staggered condition. The final chapter on this is Chapter 7, which covers gear and magical items.
Always new gear, always new magical items. I can never keep up with any of them.
It's true. The adventuring gear is pretty fun. It has a number of interesting things. I'll bring attention to the weapon rack backpack, which is just kind of fun. It's just a backpack that you can use as a weapon rack and have tons of weapons stored on it. It's kind of a neat idea.
That's kind of cool.
They have new alchemical tools, which are fun. That adds into a whole bunch of alchemical things. Really, the shining point for this section for me was when they're talking about magic items, they include magical plants, which I just kind of love the idea of just, you know, a druid circle has their standing stones, and they have a little like botanical garden around the side where they're growing all their magical plants and gillyweed and all the rest of that stuff for you to like chow down and swim underwater. And, you know, I really liked the concept of everything with Chapter 7.
Neville would be a druid.
Neville would be a druid. And a number of the magical items that they've included in the wondrous items and such they included were actually pretty good. They're all very flavorful. I can't see myself using all of them, but I can never see myself using all of them. So yeah, that's Ultimate Wilderness. It is a polarizing book. But
what did you say that there's like 40-something reviews already?
It is an interesting thing that there are over 55 reviews of it at the time of us filming this. Which means that it's been out for 2 months and it has more reviews on it than any book with the exception of the core rulebook.
And they're all apparently either 1
star or
5
stars. Which
I don't really feel that strongly either way about this book. I'd probably give it a like 3.5, almost 4.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people are disappointed in the shifter, and I know a lot of people are, you know, disappointed because it has a lot of reprints. But like I said, for me, that's handy. I don't have the money.
And even owning all the books that are being reprinted in this, it is convenient for me to have it all in one place. So
the hardcovers are the ones that I only really consistently buy, to be honest. Occasionally I'll buy one of the other books if it's something I'm really interested in. Like I have the Hell Knight Order book because I love me some Hell Knights. Yeah. But most of the time the hardcovers are pretty much all I get. So it's nice to have information that was printed in these soft covers in here for me. Because apparently the Panda's a reprint. It's been out before, and I did not know that. And so it's nice to have it in a book that I now have access to.
So generally, we here at Find the Path have liked this book, and I look forward to putting it to good use sometime soon. On the subject of other things going on, really there's only one huge announcement that kind of has to be addressed. PaizoCon tickets are up for sale. So PaizoCon.
We'll be there.
We will be at PaizoCon. We are very much looking forward to going. If any of you are going to be there, we would love if you'd stop by and say hi to us.
It's my I survived school and I graduated present to myself.
It's my I love Pathfinder present to myself. So on some news pertaining towards that, it is going to be as it usually is on Memorial Day weekend. So
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then usually a few little things Monday morning. But it's usually right around 11:30 noon, and things have wrapped up on Monday.
So basically, 25th of May, and so it's going to be basically PaizoCon as usual.
If
it's
you've
going to have a
never
lot
been
of
to
Starfinder.
PaizoCon, you should definitely go.
Yeah, it's going to have a lot of Starfinder content this year. What with Starfinder being the new thing, although they have promised some really interesting new reveals and such for the upcoming books and everything in the Pathfinder line, which includes our next waiting for, which are the Planes book that they're going to be putting out. That's going to be covering the Great Beyond and all the rest of that stuff as far as a hardcover goes. Their special guests this year are going to be the Glass Cannon Podcasts, which are the official podcasts for Paizo. I actually had the great opportunity to interview Grant Berger, who plays the character Baron Redheart in the Glass Cannon podcast. And so we're going to have that interview up for all of you probably before this actually comes out. So if you haven't checked out that, it was a great interview. They're great guys. I look forward to them being there and having the chance to hopefully speak with all of them again there. Outside of that, there's not really a whole bunch of news that we really needed to cover.
Not really.
We are going to have some new announcements coming out here soon, though.
Yes, we have a project in the works.
We do have a project in the works. It's very secret. And so hopefully all of you will like that when that will be dropping very shortly. So with that, until next time, good luck, Pathfinders.
Bye-bye. Don't die.